and on your phone and or your iPad, it should say, "We are
So yeah,
live."
it says live. Yeah. Anyway, I've got a notification from YouTube. Good
Okay.
morning.
So I'm an hour ahead, Simon, of what I was last week talking
There
to
you
you.
see. Nah. You
I'm
fooled
getting
me
closer
by
to you,
being.
or are you getting closer to me?
It does make me laugh. When people are, I admit that I do this, and they go, "Well, who do you do it with?" And I say, "I do it with a bloke in New Zealand, as far away from me as humanly possible,"
Yeah.
which I think is really funny.
Do you meet anyone who says to you, "Where's New Zealand?"
No, not fortunately, not quite.
English people know the globe. It's those North Americans that you have to watch out for, eh?
Of course, yeah. Well, yeah, the world revolves around them anyway, doesn't it?
Hey,
Right,
good
there
to
we
see
are.
you.
Yeah, too. How's it going? Good week?
Not bad, not bad. It's looking forward to another week. Getting busy at work. So yeah, we deal with that.
Is it? Yeah. Is it? Do you have a sort of run up to Christmas kind of thing?
Oh, the industry that I'm in, Simon, the construction industry is always on pressure before Christmas. It's always about getting jobs done. So builders, construction guys, anyone that's related to that industry is going to be under pressure between now and Christmas. So
Yeah.
it's just a matter of fact.
Oh, right. Okay. So yeah, it's interesting that you have a sort of run up to Christmas as well, like more traditional retail things. Yeah. People trying to get things done before Christmas, and people, get. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, of course, yours goes into the summer, doesn't it? So it's a kind of run up to summer, isn't it? So when people are actually starting to do things, build, I guess, because you're spring, haven't you?
Hey,
And
I
that
want to
I
ask
think you
you.
showed me yesterday on your walk. That whole kind of
Oh yeah,
building site
What,
completely. Yeah.
yeah. That's exactly what's happening here. There's a lot of construction going on. Hey, I want to ask you a couple of things. So obviously, we're continuing the Beatles series, Abbey Road. It's been out. The re-release has been out for a couple of days. I've listened to it a few times. I'm
Oh, well
fascinated with
done.
it. We've got R2, R3, Lockie Nut, and Dave in the chat. So g'day, guys. I've
Yeah.
managed to have a listen to it, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But we were
Yeah, I'd be
talking
interested to
off
get your
air.
first impressions of it, and you know stuff.
We were
That's really
talking
cool.
off air about the ability or the difference that Ringo Starr offers as a drummer compared to what a lot of modern listeners might be listening to. Can you elaborate a little
Just
bit more on that with
yeah.
guys in the chat?
Yeah, I was. I mean, it. Well, I mean, I think that your story about John Petrucci about Dream Theater is really interesting. I think, and I, um, you see, what I was thinking about is obviously with Ringo, and the Beatles in general, and I think that there's kind of my kids. Well, I have daughters, three daughters. Two of them are teenagers. So, um, I one of the things I've noticed is that obviously they've grown up with modern pop music, which is very on the money. It's all done to a click track. Most of it is completely synthetic. Has no real people instruments on it at all. So the producer is in complete control of the whole thing and can line everything up. Now, what I the interesting bit is that I notice that my kid, if I play something that I like the Beatles, is a good example. My kids go, "Oh, Dad, this makes me feel a bit, ooh, what's going on with it?" Because it's got the swing. And what they're not used to yet is they don't like the swing. They don't like this thing that goes, and the drummer's a bit maybe behind the beat, a bit on it, and they speed up a bit and slow down, and they got that kind of what you and I just feel as movement and the natural flow of something. What they like is it on, they like it on the money. And what's interesting is for me is it has the opposite effect on me. the modern stuff makes me feel woozy because it doesn't move, it doesn't change, it just goes tick tick. God, so often it sounds like a bloke in a shed hitting something with a hammer. But no, I don't like the sound of it very much. I don't like. I mean, sometimes it's okay. It depends what the context is, but quite a lot of it is. I can't. It makes me feel woozy, and it's interesting that the two opposite things. And it strikes me that it's this thing about if you're young and you're brought up in modern music in the last 15 years and 30 years actually. They started using click tracks about 1980, so that's 4 years. But now when it's all very studio orientated and very, very organized, that there's a kind of watershed moment. And what I noticed is that my middle daughter, who's 15, Saskia, she started playing stuff from the 50s and the 60s. So she'll play some Motown and things like that, which has that kind of swing to it. But in some ways, it has a kind of modern sound as well. But it still starts to have that swing. She started to get used to the fact that those things move in a way that modern music doesn't move. Starting to broaden the horizon. So I think it's a kind of maturity thing. Just talk about the Dream Theater thing, because I didn't know that at all.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's
all right.
pertains to this.
One of the bands I follow, it's a band called Dream Theater, and they always keep their fans, Simon, in the loop with what they do. They regularly on their YouTube channel upload videos of the process of recording an album. And what was really interesting for me, the last album that they were recording, they were out in a studio out somewhere in the outback in North America. And it's quite funny because John Petrucci is an engaging kind of guy, and they're showing them preparing a barbecue and all that kind of stuff, which is great. But what really interested me is that they got John, the drummer, in. They set up his drums, and he's drumming to click tracks. Now, this is before the guitars, before the vocal, before the keyboards are laid down. So they've worked out this drum pattern. So he drums to that. He buggers off, and everyone else comes in and adds their part.
So somebody else in the band, the first thing they've done is they've worked out a drum track for him to drum to. So they said, so it's more than a click track. It's an electronic kind of thing. Yeah. Oh, right. So he played. Right. So he's being given instructions on what to play.
Yep.
Okay. Right. Okay. Yes. I thought he was just playing to a click track and making up stuff, but he's obviously. So they've got a structure on. Then he sent it back to them, having done his bit. And what? And then they put the song over the top.
Yeah.
Yeah. You see what I mean? So that has to be very accurate, very on the money. Sorry, got a frog in my throat. Hold on.
Which is completely different to the process that they did when they had John. When they had Portnoy.
Mike Portnoy.
Mike Portnoy. So what they did is they did a lot of their stuff live. So they would rehearse it.
Yeah.
So those classic Dream Theater albums are all, basically live, as opposed to the last couple of albums where they're,
Oh, that's interesting.
Just an observation. But this is going back to a conversation that Simon and I were having, guys, in the chat. So I was watching a show a couple of days ago where one of the hosts was talking about Ringo Starr, saying that Ringo sucks as a drummer, and another host basically kicked him in the nuts, saying, "What are you talking about? Ringo Starr is one of the greatest drummers in the world, and if you're a musician, you're not a musician if you think that Ringo Starr is a hopeless drummer." But what Simon's doing is Simon is elaborating for us, obviously, the difference in the listening, the generational thing. And I hate to say that. I hate to say that it's a generational thing because it makes me sound like I'm old, that, and I don't want to be. I don't want
Young and
music.
relevant.
Yeah, I don't want music to be generational. But I think you're right, Simon. When you're listening to something that's precise, something that has no swing, something that's vertical as opposed to horizontal.
And I think that, and I was telling you this story. I go on this guitar breaks. I've talked about it on here. This guitar breaks holiday. One of the guys on there, Pat De Jong, he plays in 4 bands, right? So he plays in a Cuban jazz band, which is it's a dance band, Cuban dance band. He plays in a Joy Division covers band, but he also plays bass in a death metal band.
Hey,
And what
Kubrick.
he says about it, good morning, Kubrick lover. How you doing? Hope you're good. What he says about it is that because it's like really heavy but really precise, they have to practice for 2 months before they play because they have to get everything. So you can imagine if you've got a lot of things to lock in together, and obviously playing really fast licks and fast things, it's got to be on the money, and there's not, you don't play that stuff either side of the beat and stuff like that. Yeah. R2, I agree with you. I think I would say he has swing. He swings. I've said this before. Really? Dave, not impressed, obviously. Remix the tracks for a new generation. I don't know if you felt that. Actually, we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, I think that that's what happens, and a lot of these, this kind of modern metal is put together like that, very precisely, to click tracks. Yeah, everybody's because it's complex. It has a lot of things. A lot of fast playing and stuff like that, and you can't have fast playing unless everyone's going to be on the money. I don't think.
Sure.
The whole thing about
It'll fall apart.
Yeah, it'll fall apart, and it'll just sound like a mess. So you've got to be, when you're playing that stuff, it's got to be, and I guess it's, thinking about it, it's probably a necessity thing. Yeah, if you're going to make that kind of music, you have to record it in a certain way, and because if you don't, you either get, you could probably do it organic, you can get really tight, so you're really doing, so you practice for 2 months before you're doing it, but in the studio, what you're actually doing is, you're obviously recording it. So what you do is you record it to the click track so that you keep it all together, and you can, if somebody's a bit out, you can pull it back in, you can line it all up, so it's really precise. Now, that is the opposite to what the Beatles did, get in a room, mic it all at 1, 2, 3, 4, and you have a very different style of playing. B, you naturally have that swing because the drummer is setting, to some extent, setting the pace, that how fast you go, stuff like that, and there'll be a natural speeding up in the choruses a bit and slowing down, and if you get to sort of slightly different middle eight, it'll slow down a bit and things, it's not precise. Now, for somebody in my generation, I feel that, and I feel comfortable with that because that's how the majority of the records that I've made, that I've listened to, all those records that I bought when I was in 1972, all those bands I went to see, that's pretty much how they recorded. Deep Purple recorded Machine Head in Montreux, in that hotel. They set up, they might have put different sort of, different rooms, but they set up and they played. All the basic tracks are done together. They're not separated. They're not just done, somebody sitting in a room, as you say, like Dream Theater. Now, some of that's technology. Quite a lot of that is technology. They didn't have the technology to do those things in those days. It was a more organic thing. So that's how they recorded, and that's what they did. And I feel much more comfortable with those records records, listening to them, the sound of them and the feel of them, than I do most modern, rock records in many ways. Somehow the precision takes away for me. Takes away some of the feel, and what I'm looking for is some feel, some connection with the people who are playing as a group, not as a single, not as a single entity, against a click track. Does that make any kind of sense?
Well, Dave mentioned something, here in the chat about he's mixing it for a new generation. So I want to defend Giles or or however his name is.
Giles.
I want to defend him because I've listened to that album. Not a lot of the outtakes, so unfortunately I'll listen to them. But I've listened to the album about 4 times. And incidentally, on my Apple earbuds, and I'm going to say it's not a remaster; it's a remixing, isn't it? It's a remixing. It's not a remaster. So the first thing that I heard that struck me was the second song, Something, where you could hear George's backup vocals. Distinctly, you can hear the guitar tracks distinctly, and then I Want You, She's So Heavy, you can hear the bass a lot clearer. It's fascinating. I'm going to say that it's not necessarily mixed for a younger generation's ears, but certainly for our generation, for somebody that knows the Beatles. We're listening now to a lot of the instruments and probably the harmonies that were a bit muddied or not clear in the original recordings come through clearer. So it's certainly mixed for our generation.
Cleaned up, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So, and your perspective, and I've not heard much of the new ones, and I'm behind as usual. So, would you say that it's a radical remix, or is it actually a clarity thing?
It's subtle and clarity, subtle and clarity. But I wanted to obviously listen to as many of the outtakes, because I think the outtakes are certainly the going to be the key for a lot of rock and roll fans. And we can talk about them as we listen to them, I suppose. But there's an interesting conversation. They're recording one of the I Want You, She's So Heavy. They're recording that, and there's a bit of a discussion between John Lennon and a couple of the other Beatles, and George Martin is asking them to keep quiet, to tone it down, and John Lennon's saying, "Why?" And George is saying, "Oh, they've had a complaint from people outside," and John Lennon's saying, "But it's 2:00 in the morning," and that's obviously precisely why.
They've had a complaint from outside. How funny that you could hear them outside. It's really cranked.
So how loud would they have been, Simon, if they were getting complaints from their neighbours?
Well, you'd think that a studio would have a certain amount of. Although, of course, Abbey Road, those rooms in Abbey Road were built way pre rock and roll. They were built they could have orchestras in them. So my guess is that an orchestra's not necessarily quiet when but not necessarily have the same kind of soundproofing as if you built a modern studio now and you were going to record modern rock music. Putting, I don't know what, putting cranked guitar amps and stuff like that in those rooms, those large echoey rooms, great reverb and stuff. But maybe the sound, they got, I don't know if they have windows in and stuff. I've never been to Abbey Road, but but those big rooms with those orchestral type setup for orchestral things, great setup of banding, but obviously the sound is going to leak out. I would have thought, because you don't have the same, it's not floating rooms and all of this modern technology stuff you can put into, to stop the sound of your cranked Marshall, waking up half the street.
But maybe another interesting song too, that like John is talking, and then he's singing "Come Together," and what amazes me, Simon, is that his voice, like this, he's talking into a mic, obviously.
Yeah.
And then the band starts, and he starts singing. So the difference between his talking voices and his singing voice is remarkable. It's fantastic.
What, in terms of volume or in terms of timbre and
everything? It's it's the first thing I noticed. Like you're hearing a guy, and I suppose the same thing would be with you if you were going to be talking and all of a sudden break out into a song.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
But that was one thing that struck me, was obviously hearing him talk, and then he's into a song. It's it's amazing. It's just spellbinding.
But in a sense, that the thing you've just said, the important bit for me is the fact with the other guys, there's a sort of counting, and still, even in 1970, recording Abbey Road, they're still recording. The basic band records together.
Oh, absolutely.
The four and 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you put the stuff, you overdub the strings, whatever. I know Abbey Road, they pull things out of the corridor, saying, "What's one of these? Let's put this on," and anvils and stuff, and all sorts of stuff like that. That I think is, but obviously overdubbed over the top, but overdubbed not to a click track, but to the original band playing. So what you have to have is you have to have, the basic track, playing whilst you record your anvil playing or whatever.
Well, Come Together, for example, has got the first track is John playing, Paul playing, and Ringo playing, and then they add George's Les Paul guitars, and then they get who's the keyboardist that came in, the black
Billy
guy.
Preston.
Yeah, then they get Billy to lay some keyboard tracks. But it's basically the three Beatles. I was going to say Rolling Stones. It's the three Beatles.
That is a Freudian slip, isn't it?
Yeah. Laying it down. So. Yeah.
But you can see that that there is a marked difference. You'll still, whatever you do over the top is retaining the feel, the swing, the the tempos of the original song, because that's how the original 3 or 4 people made it. And everyone has to play over the top, don't they? Yeah. Rather than I can send you the click track, you just play for this, and then I can make I'll know that it's fine. I'm the producer, and I can line it all up. Yeah. It's interesting that, and I think that it is a generational thing, that that if you that for a lot of people, if you work in that that metal world, that Ringo's drumming might easily drive you scatty, because it's a bit unorthodox. It swings, therefore it's speeds up and slows down, and it does things. It's not that in that precise kind of organised world would be deemed to be one has said it, not very good. Because it's a different thing completely. And but having what you and I think of as being the essence of it, for some other people, drive them scatty. There you are. That's personal taste, isn't it? In a nutshell.
Yeah. Well, getting back to Dream Theater, some of the early albums, Falling into Infinity, and oh gosh, if R2, R3's in here, he'll know them. The ones at Portnoy, they're fantastic. But the last couple of albums, you listen to John Petrucci's playing, and Dave from the Johnny Bean show has said it many times. You know, he's mechanical. He plays scales. It's perfect. You know, it's too perfect
Yeah.
for a guy like you know, a guy like me. You know, I
So
don't mind. I don't mind hearing mistakes.
so when they play live, I got a list of them here. What images and words? Awake, 6 degrees of inner turbulence, train of
Awesome
thoughts.
album.
Yeah,
Yeah,
see,
yeah.
a dramatic turn of events.
So that's
What
when
other?
it starts getting a bit mechanical.
Okay, yeah. So the early stuff. When dream and day unite. It's their first one by the looks of things. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's really interesting. It's the what was I going to say? Yeah, when they go live, when they do live, do they play to click tracks and stuff, or does the drummer have does he have headphones on, so they're playing to click tracks and things? Would I must think they must, I presume that not. You're right. Make a contentious statement. I don't necessarily mean it to be contentious, but I mean, do they have to, they play to click tracks because some of it is they're using pre-recorded stuff, samples or whatever that need to be triggered at particular points in the. I'm not saying they do or they don't. I don't object, by the way. I'm fine with that. Technology is technology. We Dr. How you doing, Dave? Thanks for dropping by, man. It's really good to see you.
Look. Certainly,
I'm
their
cool
songs
with
are
it.
complicated.
It's
Their songs are complicated, and they tell
yeah.
stories and concept albums, and
Mm-hmm.
they're not rock and roll songs. It's
No.
what
It's
the
a
core of
prog.
progressive metal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's an acquired taste for a lot of people. I know a lot of metalheads who just don't like progressive metal at all. And some people that I know that are progressive metal nuts don't like Van Halen, or hard rock.
Can you draw a line back? Say, I'm Dream Theater. Can you draw a line back? Because I don't really know their stuff at all. Um, can you draw a line back to say Yes and things like that? What I would call prog. Do they have any kind of lineage with that? I don't. Yes or not?
They
So
love Yes. Yeah. John Petrucci
John
loves
Petrucci.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's one of their and Rush. They worship those bands. Yeah.
Oh, very. Kubrick lovers. He's run out of words, probably, is he? See, that's interesting. You see, Kubrick lover. I don't know how old you are. Apologies. But we were just, this discussion earlier about whether it's a generational thing, and whether, I mean, I think that's certainly true. I mean, but you see, I might even draw a line between Keith Moon and John Bonham and Neil Peart, and say that Neil Peart is maybe a bit younger than them, and therefore I don't know whether Rush. You see, Rush to me use. I'm sure they use stuff like when they get to the 80s, they started using click tracks because there's only three of them. Some of their stuff must be samples and triggered and stuff. I don't know. It's fine. I don't have any problem with that. If you've got to go out and play live, you have to make it work. There's only three of you. Everyone's only got two hands. And if there's a load of stuff that you physically can't do because you've only got two hands, then you find another way of doing it. I mean, the Who did it with the synthesizer bits on "Won't Get Forward Again" and Barbara O'Reilly. They'd go out with a tape machine, and then it would break, and then it would be bad.
And fans can be quite demanding and quite tough on the bands that they follow. Like Van Halen got crap from a lot of fans when they when Eddie didn't play the synthesizer part to Jump when they were touring because Sammy couldn't.
They got a man to do it, did they?
Well, they just it was just no, it was just
Recorded.
Recorded because Sammy couldn't sing and play Eddie's guitar parts. Continue doing that. He did it at the start, but couldn't.
Okay, well done.
Yeah.
Well done, him.
Yeah. yeah. So and a lot of fans got upset because a band was playing a recorded keyboard
Yeah,
piece. So
yeah. You see, Kubrick, I was 47, so he's ooh, nearly 15 years younger than me. That's very upsetting. But my point is that Kubrick Lover, I started buying records in 72 when I was 14. So if I take the same measurement for you, you started in what, 80, 87, 88, that sort of thing. So you see, by 88, all sorts of technology, we'd had, it was about 1980s, the sort of advent of the click track and the advent of things like
drum machine.
Lindrums. Yeah, Lindrums. Suddenly people, producers found they could have control. They didn't need a drummer, because they could program these drums to do things. And therefore, then they had control over tempos and speeding up and slowing down and all those things, and it, so in effect, I would say that it's something I struggled with, and in the 80s I didn't really go for the electronic stuff. Just felt obviously too artificial. So I sort of had a bit of an underground period in the 80s. I think probably my favourite band from the 80s was REM, which of course are much more of an organic rock band. Probably lots of other kind of organic rock bands. You heard? I don't know about that. Do you know about that? Sammy Hagar and Leslie Roth toured together without Van Halen singing Van Halen stuff. Did they? I've not
Yeah,
heard
they
that.
did. They did
Did they?
in the late 1990s, and there's some
That's interesting.
hilarious clips on YouTube where Sammy Hagar runs to the changing room of David Lee Roth and
Dave.
bangs on there, and he's trying to talk to him, and because and Dave tells him to piss off and won't open up, uh,
What sort of
and
skits? Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Oh no, it's serious. Yeah.
Oh,
Dave.
really?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
serious. Yeah. It's
But sounds like something out of Spinal Tap, doesn't it?
that that that's when David Lee Roth had his hair like really white and long. You might
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah, but only vaguely, I have to say.
Yeah, and and Sammy's trying to call him out, say, "Come on, man, let's go and have a party. Let's have a drink. Come on." And Dave's, it's hilarious.
Hiding behind the door.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
That is funny, isn't it? That is. Yeah, but not as a skit, as a serious thing.
Oh no, deadly
That could be in
serious.
Spinal. That could be in Spinal Tap, couldn't it? For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't David Lee Roth? Isn't David Lee Roth? Jeepers!
Okay.
I don't know what David Lee Roth is on, but if you've kept up with what he's been saying over the last couple of days, he thought of the name. He wrote the songs. He wrote the solos. I can't. He went into the studio and told
Eddie,
Eddie
what to play? Play this.
what to play. What?
Of course, we're all for that, aren't we? Not. It is funny though, isn't it? You're absolutely right. It's like, Dave, step aside, mate. What does that actually sound like to anybody? It just sounds like, they're not called Lee Roth, are they? They're called Van Halen. I wonder why they're called Van Halen. Because the Van Halens, from what I've seen of it, and I'm not a great fan particularly, but from what the experts say, that actually, that it's the Van Halens that run it. Eddie
The
does
Van Halen show.
yeah, that's why it's called Van Halen. And the other two come into that world. You may write the lyrics and stuff like that. That's fine. And maybe some contributions to things, but I can't imagine that you'd be going in and saying to Eddie, "Play this." It takes some sides, doesn't it, to even think of it? Never mind doing it. So Kubrick lovers answer my question. So he's the late 80s and early 90s. Yeah, for 5 years, all I listened to was classical music, and the Doors got him into classic rock. Wow, that's really. Well, I'm all about that. So bands like Michael Jackson, Van Halen, Rolling Stones, Blondie. Yeah, so you cross the you're going to cross the Rubicon
Yeah.
between the old world and the new world, because obviously things like Def Leppard and stuff like that is very new world, isn't it? That thing about
Sure.
um, recording with what's he called? Oh, Mutt Lang, Robert John Mutt Lang. That's right. But doing individual notes in a chord and stuff like that. Which sounds a bit mad to me, but
The Doors are pretty good.
Doors. I love the Doors. One of my favourites. I'm completely. But
Jim Morrison loved the blues. He loved the blues.
Yeah. I love the Doors. I think but that for me, it's interesting, Kubrick. Yeah. I suppose the question: do you notice the difference between, say, Michael Jackson and Def Leppard and the Rolling Stones? Do you feel the difference in in the way the music is put together, and the way that the Rolling Stones is a very organic process, people in the room playing together?
While he's writing that, I'm going to say, from an 80s perspective, if you look at Dirty Work and you look at Blondie's stuff, the Police's albums, and Def Leppard, I'm going to say there's a similarity, there's a synthesis between all those bands.
Yeah, yes, I mean, the Police must cross that line, mustn't they? Because they obviously started off in sort of '78. The three of them. Well, they started off before Sting, didn't they? Had another guitar player, Henry Kowalski, I want to say. Anyway, he I listened to classic music. Classic rock. I got into jazz, and I only like jazz from late '50s to '70s fusion. Oh, okay. Ornette Coleman and. Ornette Coleman's quite out there, but you have eclectic tastes, Kubrick lover. I like jazz.
Coleman's got a nice hat collection.
Yeah. He's quite out there, Ornette, and his later stuff certainly. Yeah. How interesting, yeah. Wow. It's, I wonder if so. I mean, I guess the Police would, go back to, the Police would have started in, playing punk and things. Yeah. What am I saying? It's a good question, Kubrick lover. So, what am I saying? What we were talking about is that business about pre-1980, pretty much, when producers started making bands record to click tracks, and therefore you bring everything into line. Everything becomes much more easily controlled, but has less swing and tempo changes and things like that. Whereas if you listen to Exile on Main Street, there's all sorts of obviously, because it's people playing live in a room together, that the drummer will set the thing and he'll play and he'll have lots of swing and stuff, and because he's not playing to a click track, he's playing to himself, his own inner metronome, and then he'll speed up a bit in the choruses and slow down, things like that. And
they were smart enough when they were remixing that album too to keep that natural reverb that obviously that they were getting from the basement. And I think that's one of the key things too that you have to understand. And I've never been a record producer in my life. I'm just a fan of the music. But when you listen to some of the discussions that these record producers give to us on YouTube or in some of the books, Simon, they make it quite clear that sometimes you just have to listen. You've got to listen as a fan as opposed to being the record producer, and probably sometimes argue with the band.
Yeah. Oh yes, that's definitely there's definitely producers thing, but I know I've read interviews with Trevor Horn, particularly, people like who say that that kind of advent of the click track and the Lindrum, took away this kind of the uncertainty.
All they wanted to do was just speed up the recording process, Simon. That was basically. I don't want to poo-poo it, and I'm not anti-technology, but the click tracks and the drum machines were just, instead of spending 4 weeks in the recording studio, it's 1 week or 2 weeks, Simon.
Do you think the technology sped it up? See, I would have said the technology. I mean, I
No,
just,
no, no.
I
That
always
was
said
the
it.
intention with the click tracks. The intention with the click tracks was to
Oh, I see, to speed things up. Yeah, so you could
yes,
get things done more quickly because you didn't
yes,
have
yeah,
to.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I guess that's probably from a producer's point of view.
Sure.
From a yes, yeah, not from band, not obviously bands, that organic thing of bands going, like the Stones go into a studio and they kind of,
A lot of bands argued against
you
it.
know,
A lot of bands wanted to take their drummer in
yeah,
and the drums.
yeah. Yeah, we want our drummer. You're not having him. Send him away. Sounds like Ringo in the first Beatles session, doesn't it? We've got Andy White to play on it rather than you. Which I guess it's a similar thing, isn't it? You don't get a session drummer in. You get a Lynn drum and a click track.
Yeah.
And I think yes, Dane's right. See, at the same time as computers make it to studios and start, people start doing things on computers and start having the technology available to them. So it's the start of what I would call being able to visually produce something. So you've got a screen with the tracks on it. On a tape machine, they're just on a tape machine in the corner. You don't see them. Therefore, what? Yes, Kubrick lover, you're right. It just transforms to technology. It's it changes the way people do things, and you move forward, and some of it's better and some of it's worse, and it's just different. I think that's completely right. True. But going back to my point is that that from a producer's point of view, they start to see things on a screen, and when you start to see things on a screen as opposed to listening to it, you have a different perspective. So you're saying, there's a gap there. There's a bit where nobody's playing, kind of thing, And instead of listening to it, going, that's fine, it goes really well, the gap is there, it's fine. You start to infill things. We'll have, more intricate things. We'll have more things. We'll put something in there, kind of thing. Somebody on the keyboard go and write 8 bars. Just fit in that bit because that bit only has, I don't know, bass and drums in it or something. Stuff like that. So I think that when you look at something visually, you interpret it and deal with it differently to when you listen to it orally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there's also this interesting discussion too, Simon, which I haven't heard before and I haven't listened consciously to. But when Abbey Road was released, a lot of people were making a statement about the sound that they were listening to on Abbey Road was completely different to anything else that the Beatles had recorded. And they've linked it back to the solid state 8-track system
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, the solid state desk, didn't they? Yeah, going away from valves.
That they were using as opposed to the 4-track valve system that they'd used in the past. Now I'm not an audiophile, so I don't know. But I think it's fascinating for guys like us and guitar players to pick up on that and probably discuss it, because obviously when we go back and listen to these albums over the next couple of months or couple of weeks, we're going to be conscious and aware of it and try and pick it out ourselves. But I can honestly say I never heard any distinction between those early albums and their last album. But it was a discussion that was pretty
Ongoing.
big at the time.
Yeah. Yes, and I guess that one of the byproducts of remastering and stuff, Giles Martin gets to remaster it. So first of all, thing he'll do is digitize everything. Yeah, completely. Wednesday. Yeah, you see. So it's all about the battle between the bands and the producers, the age-old battle, and that that when as soon as you digitize everything, so you put it, then you have already homogenized something a bit. Yeah, you've lessened the difference between recording on that, and I read that thing as well about the sort of transistorized desk as opposed to a valve desk. Then you start, you're EQing sound and better, right? You're taking away those differences.
Sure.
One might, in a way that you're not accentuating them. you're taking them away because you're doing everything in a digital world, which is kind of what you have to do. You have to. You can't. I doubt that you probably get access to an 8-track tape machine, but those tapes are 50 years old. They would need to be treated, probably baked for several years in an oven kind of thing, and then so they could play. You need to find a thing and.
Oh, well, I think it's fascinating because it's giving, like Dave mentioned earlier, a generation of young people who may not have heard of the Beatles and the hype about a re-release. So, if there are some 20-somethings or some people, young teenagers that are going to be listening to the Beatles because it's on the YouTube when they hook up their YouTube account and they go and listen to it, that's fine, that's fantastic. It's in search of new markets, but it's going to give guys like us who've been listening to Abbey Road, Simon, for 20 years, or 10 years, who've never heard these subtle differences. I've never been privy to these debates or discussions. So I'm quite excited over the next couple of months just to make a note of listening to these things, these highlights, just for the pure pleasure of it.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. And it'd be, as I say, I'm interested in doing the same thing as well, kind of thing. Although I, like you, am not an audiophile. I don't sit down and listen to something. I've got a stereo and stuff. I put it on my stereo. I listen. And if I've got a chance, if everyone's out, I could turn it up a bit.
Yep.
But I listen for the music. I listen for the totality of it. I don't spend my time. I don't have the sitting there going, oh look, the cymbal sounds a bit different there. You know what I mean? That I have to say that doesn't really interest me anymore. Isn't it? Well, not anymore. It never has. It's been the whole album. You put on the album, you get a feeling about it. You get some people playing, and you get the song. And you go, that's a cool guitar solo or whatever. I don't sit there thinking, wow, that's a different guitar sound, or they've changed the whatever. I've never done that, really, never been an audiophile in those ways.
But it's wonderful, though, Simon, when you sit down and hear Little Darling, or, and you're hearing, the first time you're hearing George Harrison whisper in your ear, Little Darling.
Don't completely,
that you didn't hear
before,
and then all of a sudden you're hearing Little Darling. It's wow. It's
that's a spine tingling moment. Yeah, no, completely. I understand. I get that. But but what you're responding to is the effect. Because that somebody whispering in your ear, and kind of and you've never heard it before. Is a really cool thing to do, isn't it? It's an effect that has an emotional response in you. You don't go, listen to that.
But that's exactly what George would have wanted us to have heard. I'm sure of it. That's exactly the response I think George Harrison would have wanted when he was recording that song.
Yeah. It's I don't know if you've ever heard it. Have you ever heard? You can get they're on YouTube. But have you ever heard the Marvin Gaye heard it through the grapevine?
Oh, many times.
But have you heard the single track of him in just his vocals?
Oh no.
When he's waiting to do it, and he's kind of, you've got to listen to that. It's a fantastic kind of, because what he does, he starts. Arvin, good morning. How you doing? Hope you're good. Basically, and he's kind of chatting and the thing, and he's kind of practicing what he's going to do before he actually sings.
Oh, check it out.
And then he comes in and he sings, that, and then he obviously has a gap or something, But yeah, there's those kind of talking and kind of messing about, and him going, ooh, before he does it. Oh, it's well worth checking it out. So it's amazing kind of. Yes, Kubrick lover, I agree. And it kind of that medley thing at the end, is a kind of
phenomenal.
Can be seen as a sort of portent of, Yes, and the sort of stuff in the prog rock of the 70s almost. I might hazard throw at.
And all
As I
planned
will
that
put,
guitar solo on the end with where they all take
they all
the
take one.
same
Yeah.
eight bars each or something like that, and
Mm.
all planned, all determined beforehand. Phenomenal.
Yeah, completely. As I say, when I listened to it the other day, when we were going to talk about it, the thing that struck me the most on it was, and I'll say it again because I think it's worth it. What a bass player Paul McCartney is. I mean,
Wow.
wow, tremendous kind of.
No argument from me.
That's what really struck me, and reminded me, and I go back to my original session, original question: are the Beatles underrated? You know,
Mm.
I think they are. I think even though all of that, you could put them on top of the mountain, everything else, I still think they're underrated as a group. Yeah, Kubrick. Yes, it's yeah, yeah. You know, admire Prince massively. He's an amazing artist. Yeah, mad as a
That
box of
guitar
frogs. But
solo that he's doing, it's famous on YouTube. He's doing a guitar solo with Tom Petty, and is it is it at is it at is it at the bloody
what
concert for George?
Prince or you talking about Prince? You're not talking about Prince here.
No, it's not at the concert for George. It's something else. It's at some award thing, and I think George Harrison might be there with him. Anyway, Tom Petty
Right.
is, and he's
Okay.
playing a phenomenal guitar solo on his Telecaster. Blew me away, Simon. I had no idea how
It's
much of a
fantastic. Yeah.
guitar player he was.
Oh, an amazing guitar player and stuff, and kind of and yeah, yeah. An amazing artist. Anybody who could produce that body of music and that kind of But as all great artists, also mad as a box of frogs. Completely.
Yeah, he was.
Nobody to control it. It's kind of So I retreat to my Purple Palace and I knock out millions of songs. Which are hidden in this massive vault. Yeah, I know. Yes, I know. It's a great word, isn't it? Vault. You have this image of kind of rows, miles of corridors with the.
What was it called? Paisley Park was
Paisley Park. That's what it's called. Yeah.
His mansion, Paisley Park.
It's a studio mansion, studio, chateau. Yeah. Kubrick Lover's got a list of welding. Kubrick, that spreads the. I mean, Led Zeppelin, Nirvana, Lady Gaga, Rolling Stones, Beatles, Pink Floyd, Hendrix, Queen. Yeah. I'm with you on lots of stuff. Was it? Here we go. Look, George Harrison. I think Prince was doing "While My Guitar Gently Weeps," which sounds about right. Is that it?
That's it. Yeah. Spot on. That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
Yeah. It's phenomenal, that guitar solo. And he goes up to the edge of the stage and he just about falls.
Falls off, does he? God. Teetering
Yeah.
on the edge of
Wow.
Yeah. Is it it's kind of, but yeah, I think that making a statement, I can be a rock musician too, kind of thing, But yeah, I mean, I always knew that he was a great guitar player, Prince and stuff. He could do that stuff. He could do anything. I think he'd nothing was out of bounds with him, was that? Whatever he wanted to do.
I'm going to tell you a secret. In 1981, when Little Red Corvette and came out, I secretly liked that song. I didn't admit it to my friends.
Did you not?
But I secretly liked 1999 when that album came out. Yeah, Little Red Corvette and what was the other song that was on that? Gonna Party Like It's 90. Yeah, it's
1999. Yeah. It's a. I mean, I thought Sign of the Times was a fantastic record. Just amazing, kind of eclectic. Different styles, different everything. And kind of throw mud at the wall and see what sticks. I mean, that's that is the definition of it. An astonishing record. And I think everybody people I knew liked that record,
Oh,
and
his catalog's
but
amazing. Doves Cry and Raspberry Beret. It just when I heard that song Raspberry Beret, I instantly thought of the late 1960s. I don't know why. It was just when I
oh, it
heard
had a
that.
psychedelic edge to it for sure.
Yeah,
It definitely had a
yeah,
psychedelic edge. Yeah.
yeah,
Here's
yeah,
something else I can do.
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
But I
Wow.
think what's great about it is, they weren't pastiches. They weren't just kind of shallow interpretations. They had their own merit and their own thing, and it's amazing. It's an amazing player, an amazing artist in the truest sense. And as I say, as part of being an artist, mad as a box of frogs, to kind of, which is all the best artists are, aren't they? Flawed and kind of in other areas difficult, mad, but you know you pay attention to the music, I mean they're all, but so many of them are like that, aren't they? I mean, John Lennon, very difficult character, but fantastic, musician and stuff, Bob Dylan, who knows about his Bobness, but you know, but their art is what shines through. But I think that having that kind of, if I use the G word, the genius bit, that takes away from other areas of your personality in a way,
Oh, and then you can take that genius component that you're talking about, Simon, in the music industry. You can take it to the other side of the wall with the producers. George
Mm.
Martin, a genius, clearly,
Oh,
clearly, clearly, and Jimmy Miller, yeah, hey heck,
good morning. How you doing,
yeah,
Mr. Haxer? But you see, Kubrick never says, Prince's eyes with James Brown and Hendrix, and of course Sly Stone. Let's not
oh yeah,
forget Sly Stone, who
yeah,
is Prince before Prince was invented. If you go back
yeah,
and listen to Sly Stone records, there's a riot going on, stuff like that. That's what Sly Stone did in a crazy, mad, coked up way. Those astonishing records
and the
that,
way
that
that he
he did.
dressed too, yeah,
Yeah,
avant-garde,
yeah, yeah,
a bit of
avant-garde and
pimp,
stuff. Yeah, but
you
and
know,
also that rock thing as well. Having definitely that rock element. Oh yeah, I think for
that
me,
pimp
Prince
element,
was the next version of Sly Stone as
yeah,
much as anybody, probably more than anybody else.
and surrounding themselves with hot, and when I mean hot, I mean exceptionally good woman
Well,
musicians.
what he used to do, Sly Stone. He'd pick up a woman and he'd say, "Come back and sing on my record." So he'd
Yes,
take her back to the studio. Sing on my record, Gov. you know, but apparently there were quite a lot of backing vocals on lots of these records. Apparently, he recorded so much on some of them, you could see through the tapes. You could see through the tapes because they got so thin because he recorded them, and of course they start to get a bit muddy and a bit disorganized. Kubrick was fine. I completely agree. Why not? What it shows. I mean, Kubrick was listing a whole list of bands here, like lots, which is great. What it shows is that most people, I think, you can't pigeonhole most people into saying, oh well, he's a metalhead or he's a whatever. Yeah, you know, we all like huge breadths of music. If you go and look at my record collection, I've got jazz records, I've got Beatles, Stones, I've got all sorts of stuff, just stuff I like, and it cannot be categorized by genre or and I don't think I can be pigeonholed, and I think that's the case for most of us. That we cannot be pigeonholed. We like Prince, we like Guns N' Roses, we like Bob Dylan, we like Sly Stone, you like Marvin Gaye, whatever it is, and Bob Marley, whatever, and you just like things, that touch you, move you, and that could be anything, isn't it? And and I think that but and I think this possibly is something about I'm going to bring age into it again. That people our age, when we were brought up, that's what it was. If you think about Led Zeppelin, Led Zeppelin did loads of folk stuff. They did that reggae thing, Do You Make It? And they did, so you never knew what they were going to, blues, heavy stuff, you never knew what they were going to do because nothing was out of bounds to them to do. Whereas now, it's much more genre specific, isn't it? I don't know whether, that modern metal bands, if you like, are modern metal, yeah? And they fit into that little like that. I don't think their fans
right.
necessarily do, but they do, And so, I can't think of any modern metal bands because I'm rubbish. But, I don't, would you figure that they would do something as eclectic as Led Zeppelin 3? Do you think a
No,
modern band like that,
And the same thing with the Rolling Stones. You listen to Let It Bleed. There's a strong country element to a
completely,
lot of, right up to Some Girls, and that's the interesting thing about the bands that you just listed, Simon, like Led Zeppelin. They're not afraid to jump out of whatever that hard rock category that they were in, or that blues rock category, and experiment and present to us as fans, as listeners, what they call the CIO, the Celtic, Indian, African component to a lot of their music. And I think that goes back also to what you and I were talking about last week, where the recording industry, and Frank Zappa mentioned it, and we were parroting off Frank Zappa.
Well, yeah.
There was a time where the record industries were run by business guys who were quite happy to put stuff out to see if it sold. Then when you got so-called experts, the young cats, the groovy guys, the hipsters, into the recording industry, and they were telling the producers and the record company owners what was hot and what's not, and they listened to them.
Yeah. All of a sudden, you've got the tastemakers, whereas the guys in the suits who were, in their 50s were going, well, I don't know anything about it, just let's put it out and see, let's throw enough mud at a wall and see if something, which I think is a good argument for why there's so much eclectic music from the late 60s, that kind of hippie period. So much. You dig into the underground of all that stuff. There's loads of kind of crazy, just stuff. Frank Zappa is one of the people who made it crazy, but there's lots of other people making those things.
You're not going to get Dream Theater recording a song with a mandolin and an acoustic guitar. Led Zeppelin did that. They were happy. They were happy to get a mandolin and a tambourine and some bongo
or what are they called?
and record something. Because they were determining what the fans were going to listen to. Dream Theater now, all respect to them, this is what you are. You're in this package. This is what your fans want. Yeah, sad.
Yeah, I think Kubrick Lover, you're right. It wasn't a case of taking more risks. It was a case of I don't have any boundaries because I don't know what they are. Because I think that vision in the we'll get to that that vision, that late 60s early thing was we can do anything. I can do any kind of music I like. Look at all this. Led Zeppelin are a good example, but they're not. Every record was different. Every record had different stuff on it. They were always looking to develop musically, change things around, and whatever route they took. And I think that it's not so much of taking risks, it's just not knowing or just not having a boundary, not having a box. I think the Beatles are the archetype, the people who led that. Every record of theirs is A, a progression, and B, a completely different kettle of fish to the last one.
Absolutely.
And hats off to them for continuing to progress, change, experiment, and have no no boundaries about, you know. I mean, the Beatles, you know, band who wrote, you know, I mean, we could, you know, She's So Heavy, Maxwell Silverhammer, Yellow Submarine, you know, I Want to Hold Your Hand. These all, you know, they just wrote songs, recorded them, put them out, you know.
Only John Lennon's going to hear the squeals of a tape when he's recording at home, going backwards.
Yeah,
Listens, hears that, takes that to the recording studio, tells George Martin, I want these kind of squeals
yeah,
on on my song. And what's interesting about that song, Tomorrow Never Knows, while it's the last song on that album, Revolver, it's the first song that they worked on during that whole session. So, you know, you're right, Simon. They were avant-garde when they were
yeah,
pop
you know.
musicians.
You know, yeah, completely. So they brought that element of experimentation and things into, I think, you know, Cuba Lover. Yeah, that's right. They used something called a Benson Echo Rec on John Bonham's. They set him up in the stairway of what's it? Hinton Grange is not called that at all. Of Headley Grange, that's right. They set him up in Headley Grange, and but yeah, they had a Benson Echo Wrecker delay on the drums for when the levee breaks, which you can clearly hear if you listen to it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Andrew, you know what we're talking about, don't you?
So I think one of the interesting things about, you know, these musicians, you know, the Beatles in particular, that they weren't scared. I think, to take whatever they were hearing in their heads,
Yeah.
to the group,
Yeah.
and get that down
Yes, thank you, Andy.
on tape. What's interesting is that, I didn't realise that, the world wasn't expecting Abbey Road. Abbey Road wasn't the album that the world,
Nope.
was
No.
was expecting, and in actual fact, a lot of reviews dished the album.
Yeah.
Ditched it.
What, as I said last week, one of the amazing things that, you know, that I didn't think about until I read it was that, you know, it's in the first 2 months that it was released, it sold 4 million copies.
So who was buying
You
the
know,
album then? If
well,
these so-called,
everyone's buying them because you just bought an album, you know,
so
because
what
you
were
knew
the
it'd be.
reviewers reviewing then? And they said that George Harrison's songs were mediocre.
Yeah. You see, I think that 1970. Oh, here we go. Here's another of Williams's theories. That 1970. If you think about the music press in 1970, yeah, you know, things like, particularly in the UK, Rolling Stone hadn't been going for very long then, had it?
2
You know,
years.
it's fairly embryonic, probably a bit underground still. So in the UK, you've got Melody Maker, you've got the New Musical Express. They've been going for, you know, 12. You know, they've been going through the 60s at least. You know, but those guys, the guys writing for those things, are quite old school. They don't write for. They're quite matter of fact writing. So the new kind of, is where I came in, the sort of 70s writers, you know, and I loved the NME in the early 70s, you know, Nick Kent, Charles Shaar Murray, all these guys who just wrote in kind of much more kind of, how would I describe it? In much more kind of emotive terms about music. It wasn't factual. It was about what you felt about it, about the ideas, and about, you know, what people were thinking when they recorded it, and you know, also, you know, all of that mixed in with the sort of counterculture bit, and the, you know, that all of that, and you know, there's very much a kind of treating rock music seriously, yeah, treating it as a serious art subject, and not just going, it's just pop music, hey, just put it out, you know, which I think is a lot of where, say, the early 60s were, you know, and I think that, and I, you know, my guess at 1970 is a bit, I keep using this word, Rubicon, you know, the sort of dividing line between the old school and the new school, you know, and I think that, you know, that possibly you've got quite a lot of old school, you know, pop writers writing about the Beatles, but you can't write about the Beatles in an old pop way. You have to write about them in a different way because it's a different music. To, you know, I Want to Hold Your Hand. It's not going to make it on Abbey Road, is it?
No.
You know, they're not the same things at all. And that artistic improvement that the Beatles made, you know, their journey that they made, the artistic journey, that, you know, it is punctuated at every point by albums and stuff, and, you know, and each one of them is different, each one of them is a new thing, you know, that you could, you know, and they just, as I said, they went, you know, no barriers, no kind of, you know, not building a field around me, you know, I've got some ideas, I've got some songs, we're going to go in and record them, you know, and then we're going to decide ourselves, you know, George Martin will be deciding whether they're any good, whether we put them out, what we do, you know, and that whole medley at the end is a classic case of, you know, that, you know, being put together, not really sure about what doing, you know, and that what's the track after it that they weren't going to put on, and somebody just tacked it on the end. The engineer tacked it on. Your Majesty, isn't it? He just tacked it on, and then they thought, oh well, that sounds all right. We'll leave it, you know. Whereas today, I think that mistake would never happen, would it? You know.
Yeah, well, we don't know if it's a mistake. There's a debate there because John apparently didn't. John wasn't happy that it was on there, and this is going back to the
no surprises there
between the Paul McCartney camp and the John Lennon camp. That was another example of Paul McCartney wanting to have the last say. You know.
Yeah, I imagine there's some politics involved in that as well. But you know, the initial thing where they just you know, the engineer just tacked it on the end, you know, literally tacked it on the end, you know, it was a kind of just, oh, I better do that, just put that there, fine, you know, and then all of a sudden it becomes a thing, and people go, there you go, well, no, maybe John didn't like it, but you know, others did. So I think, you know, they're kind of happenstance things that, you know. Kubrick lover, it's called a Benson Echo Rec, the delay thing for the drums on When the Levee Breaks. If that makes any sense. That's what it's called, if you want to know.
Are we good? Because I'm just mindful of the time with me here, Simon.
I know. What time is it? Is it 9 o'clock for you? Is it? You've got to go and buy your family dinner.
which would be in the old times tend to. I'm forward an hour, so it's 10 to 8, so it would be 10 to 7.
Attention. Yeah, so I'm going to show something now. As we've been talking about technology and all these things, this is. Cool. I don't know if you can see this. I'm just going to get very close in. See that?
Ah, yeah.
My mug, my VCS3 mug. This is
What's the story behind that?
Well, the story is that this is a very early 70s synthesizer, British synthesizer,
wow,
made by a British company called EMS, and my dad had. We still got one. My dad had several of these that he used on a lot of his composing. I'm sure that most people have. Thank you. I'll hold up again. You can see that. Shaking Hands of Doom. You see that? It's an amazing, astonishing kind of analog synthesizer without a keyboard. You'll notice it has pins that go into. Oh God, I can't. Where are we? There, that thing there where my finger is a pin board, and it connects. It basically connects these bits at the top here. Oh dear, as sort of sound sources. You put pins in to connect them, put them through filters and envelope shapers and stuff like that. So it's an early. I'll tell you where this appears. This appears on very, very famous records. It's all that stuff on Dark Side of the Moon, for instance, and also Eno played them on the first 2 Roxy Music albums. That's all that soundscape stuff. If you go and find some live things of Eno, that's what Eno's doing. With those weird noises, he's playing one of these VCS3s. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. So anyway, the story is that these things went around in the early 70s, and as I say, Eno, they were using them. He did, Arvin, yeah. But my dad had 3 or 4 of them, right? He bought them in the early 70s, and he used them in 2 ways. One, he would put because he did film music and TV music. What he would do is he'd record standard instruments. So he'd go to a studio and record a string quartet or clarinet or whatever, and then he'd take it back to his studio and he would put the straight instrument through the synthesizer. So you'd synthesize the sounds. So you change them, all right? Change them, and kind of he was really interested in electronic manipulation of natural sounds. So he does this throughout the early 70s and stuff, and most famously he worked on the first big David Attenborough series, Life on Earth, which is the 13-part 13 hours of the evolution of life on Earth. An amazing program. Still,
Absolutely.
I think I'm biased, but I still think it is, because it's the first of those massive documentaries. I mean, there are parallels to people doing other things, but like there's something called The Ascent of Man by Jake Bronowski. That was another kind of big, but it was in the first massive natural history thing that the BBC had ever done. And my dad did a lot of that. If you listen to that stuff, it's natural instruments manipulated through electronic equipment like that, tape delays, all sorts of things. Proper tape delays, on a tape with pencils and stuff, and little runners that would run around his desk and things. Yeah, it's fantastic. Proper analog digital delay. You increase the delay, you increase the amount of space the tape has to go. And stuff like that, because that's oh yeah. So anyway, fast forward. So these
He
things,
wasn't looking at a screen. He was using his ears.
Oh, he's using his ears. Well, yes, he had absolutely. That's all he used. He used his ears. Yeah, obviously he's looking at the screen for the pictures of the program. But so anyway, fast forward on to another, the 90s. I think, and EMS have gone bust. Basically, they've gone bust. So my dad, because he'd obviously been involved with them and stuff, and he knew a guy who'd worked for them in the early days, he bought the company name. So for a period, my dad owned EMS as a company. And he had this guy, Robin Wood, who still does it. He still makes vocoders and things under the EMS name. And and eventually my dad gave Robin the name, because obviously he'd worked in the early 70s and stuff. So he said, you can have it to continue the EMS name, and continue what you want to do. So Robin's been doing that ever since. So, as I was messing about, I think I remember what I was doing. But anyway, I was looking this up, and I just found this on the internet. It just came up, and I thought, I've got to get one of those just for a laugh, really. Could I say quite an expensive laugh? I'm for a mug. It was like, was it £23 with postage and packaging and VAT? You were done. Well, I wasn't done because I knew, but you kind of you did. I did say to myself, that's £23. That's really too much for a mug, isn't it? But I'm going to get one anyway, just for a laugh. So I took it to my mum's yesterday, because to show her and stuff. I'll just show this picture, because it does give you some idea of my dad, the mad professor. Where are we here? I don't know if people. Yeah, you can see that that way. So you can see my dad's the grey-haired gentleman, but you can see the rack there. You see the EMS rack.
Wow.
There with the oh, we're going the wrong bloody side here, where my finger is, and you go back a bit, and then underneath there's sort of all manner of other pieces of kit above and below it.
Wow.
And things. Now, this was the other bit. He had, he had a live performance group, right? That would go out. We'd do concerts and things, where you get a instrumentalist, a sax player or something, who would improvise into a mic that then went through all that stuff, and the player could control those things, the sound of them and things, and so we would do kind of quite avant-garde kind of gigs. Wow. It was called Uncle Jambo's Pendular Vibrations. What a great name that is. It's difficult for my dad to come up with something, but he was an amazing. But you can see that. You can see in that picture, that there's the VCS3 there. Yeah. That's better. Yeah, kind of there, and then there's all sorts of other nonsense in the background. But you can see it's on a rack. with these other bits and pieces on it. You know, I think it's probably a vocoder there, and I can't remember what the other things were these days, but yeah,
Wow.
amazing kind of. That's what he did. But as I say, having bought the EMS name in the in the sort of 90s, I think, you know, I mean, because it had gone bust, it wasn't, you know, it's not difficult to buy a name, it's a few quid.
Yep.
And then giving it to this guy Robin Wood, who continues to put out you know, EMS stuff on you know, under his own steam as a sort of cottage industry. It was a very nice thing to do, really. But see if I can find it. But, if I can. Anyway, so yeah, so that's why I bought it, which is quite cool, I think, you know, and I've lots, you know, so I'm not against the technology. It's but that VCS3, you look them up on the internet and see how much they go for. They are worth thousands.
Really?
Like thousands, like tens of thousands.
Holy shit!
They're worth a lot of money. It's
wow.
Because like a lot of things like that, they.
Wow.
You know, I'm just for a laugh. Look, you see, look at that figure, £21,000. This is my inheritance.
So who's buying them, Simon? And what are they buying them?
You see, they're buying old analog synthesizers. And analog synthesizers have a whole kudos, a whole kind of, you know, collector's thing about them.
So they buying them to use them, or just
buying them to use them, because they have a particular
wow.
sound. In fact, you know, my dad sold one to a guy called Adrian Utley, who, for those of us in the know, he is one of the main musicians in a group called Portishead. Have you heard of Portishead?
Yeah.
They come from Portishead, which is a town near Bristol. But I'll just show you this one as well. This is really cool. This is the same thing, but it came in a suitcase. Can you see that? It's fantastic. Actually came in a suitcase. So yeah, you know, put the lid down. The top bit is the lid, and then you've got this one had a keyboard as well, whereas the one.
Wow.
The other wooden case and stuff as well. Could I say? The other one I showed had a wooden case. It's a beautiful kind of walnut wooden case. But yeah, you can see this one's got a keyboard and stuff. That if you wanted a keyboard, it was extra on the other one. The one I showed with my dad standing beside it. You know, you didn't need a keyboard for it, but you could get one if you wanted one. It wasn't a poly keyboard. It was just a single note. You know, you could play chords. You know, play. Yep. They're amazing. Yeah, I think my cousin Basil still has one of those. He's still got one of those. He still uses it. He goes to festivals and stuff and plays it and stuff. Yeah. But you see, that's get the price. That's only £15,000.
Only 15. Only 15 grand.
Yeah.
Put that up again, Simon, please.
Sorry. I'll make it bigger. There you are.
Only 15 grand.
Only 15 grand for that, sir. Step right up. But yeah, amazing. Yeah, Kubrick Lover they are. Yes, it's a kind of British version of the Moo kind of thing. You know.
Hey, thanks for joining us, Kubrick Lover.
Yes, Kubrick Lover. Thanks for your contributions. It's been really cool, really good. Yeah.
Cheers.
And also,
I enjoy your channel, enjoy your film reviews and your DVD. So I do keep up with your channel.
Yeah, this is the other thing. I'll show this as well. I can't really see it, but this is. Can you see that thing there? Look. Right, that's only 8,500 for those of you with just a bit of pong. That's like a guitar synth. This is like a guitar synth.
Wow.
You could plug your guitar in it, and it was like an early version of you know, it had like delay and reverb and stuff like that on it. It had, you know, a multi effects thing. I think David Gilmour had some. The man from Pink Floyd, I think he had one as well. But amazing kind of. Those are the days.
That's cool.
But yeah, really cool and really, you know, as I say, and it kind of links in completely with what we've been talking about. That kind of no barriers, no, you know. I've just got an idea. You know, a British composer called Tristram Carey had an idea for that synthesizer. You know, and you take a something that generates sound, and then you put it through. And he originally, when my dad went to see him originally, he had that synthesizer, but in separate boxes. They were complete. Each unit had, and basically you took a jack plug, from one thing out to one into another, out of one into another, along this kind of shelf with these things on, and my dad was amazed by this as a kind of a way of producing synthesized sounds, which of course you're talking about 1969, 1970, is was a really new thing, really like obviously Moog as well. We're doing the same sort of thing in America. And the VCS3 is a kind of an English version of the Moog. But
Wow.
yeah, but and also that, as I say, that ability to manipulate instruments, guitars, saxophones, whatever, manipulate the sounds of those things so that they turned into other stuff, not just other instruments, so you couldn't just play horns on a keyboard kind of thing, which is obviously one way that it went. All of a sudden the keyboard player could play strings, and you could they had a mellotron as well before that, but it was just an analog sampling device, but that's the way it was going. The people, you could just see, the vistas of, opening up for you, and then I can produce something that does this, and, it's a bit of a sort of cottage industry kind of thing, because that's how you could do things in those days. And I'm not saying you can't do these things. It would be different now, but in many ways you could probably still do something like that, because because of technology, the development in technology and things, and I think it's the place I see it in that kind of way is in the pedal making industry, where guys, I don't, for instance, Lawrence Petros, who's all over these things, he has kind of other jobs alongside his, and he will make pedals, but he almost make them to order. If you say to him, "Can I have one of those?" he'll do 10 of something and see if they sell, see if they work, see if they, and then, but if you go back later, you'll make you one. I have an Italian friend of mine called Emilio, who runs a pedal company called Cornerstone Pedals, who are really good pedals. I mean, fantastic. But basically, by day he's an aeronautical engineer, and by night he makes pedals. Are really good ones. I mean, they're fantastic. They're kind of amazing pedals. But he's making, basically, because he's got an app on it. He's got an app on his phone that he can design pedal circuits on. I don't even know how that works, but apparently, if obviously know stuff about it, but yeah, he can sit there on a train or on a, whatever, design a pedal circuit, circuits for a pedal, and kind of work out what it's going to sound like, because about this stuff, on a phone. So it's not a case of wiring it all together and seeing what happens. You do it on this. Do they call it a breadboard, or is that something else? Anyway, I don't know. But anyway, yeah, you can get. He showed us this app on his phone that you could do it on. Like, bloody hell! Look at that. And it's, and I think that's in a way, as I say, it's different because the technology, but it still enables people, like that, to produce. Emilio's wife does all the soldering for them.
A real cottage industry.
Marriage, slave labor, I call it. No.
Oh.
But and he produces these things, in his. I don't know if he does them in his house, but pretty much in his house, and then he sends them out. If you order them on his, get a website, put them on. Somebody orders one, solder it all together, package it up, test it. Off it goes. And I think that's really interesting. That what technology has enabled all sorts of people to be involved in. Dave's saying the same thing. I've got an Italian pedal friend as well. He's got a company called Formula B, made me a Keith fuzz tone. See,
wow,
my point exactly, and that's the same thing, Dave, isn't it? Completely. They could just design a pedal, and you go, "Can you make me one of those?" Yep. 150 quid, bang, off you go. Thank you very much, or whatever it is. And yeah, so you can, amazing. But these are cottage industries, You know, people making pedals. You know, Emilio makes pedals out of his front room. You know, and he makes amazing pedals. You know, I've played them. You know, they're up. You know, the Gladio, which is his new one, which is like two different. It's like Dumble Overdrive. It's like two Dumble
Oh, right.
albums in a box kind of thing. It's amazing. It sounds amazing. But, you know, a piece of engineering and stuff. But you know, yeah, just makes it out of his front room. He's just had a child, so his pedal making's on hiatus for a minute. They've got somebody else to look after now. But yeah, you know, but going back to this the EMS, yeah, this is the same sort of thing, same sort of kind of quality. Somebody got a load of things, you know, separate modules, worked out how to put them together, and then they made a nice box for them, you know, looks a bit like a laptop, you know, kind of that thing with the wooden surround and things, and you know, and all of a sudden you've got something that, you know, not that many people would buy, but some people would like, you know, and you put it in the hands of, you know, Dave Gilmour, you know, and then you get all that stuff on Pink Floyd, you know, Dark Side of the Moon and things, you know, like which is, you know,
Wow.
sort of envelope shapers and stuff. Yeah, so you know, there we are. Just a small story. That's why I bought the mug, because I had to have, you know, what my dad used to own or used to use as one of the mainstays of his creative, you know, his creative tools was using that synthesizer, and he used it all the way through his, you know, his creative life. You know, and as I say, we were still doing these concerts into the 90s and things like that, or maybe more the 2000s. You know. There are people who put on us to do that kind of thing. We're all, yes, Harvard, absolutely. You know, and I, you know, it's, you know, for all the terrifying, you know, stuff that we get fed in the media and things, you know, the ability for people to do things has never been greater. The ability for people to invent, you know, alter, you know, make things themselves has actually never been greater. You know, it's never been cheaper and has never been greater. You know, you can buy easily all the components, you know, all the capacitors, all the, you know, board that it takes to make a pedal, and you can make one yourself, and you get an app on your phone that will help you to design it, and you know, you've still got to have the, you know, the clever bit is still being able to do it and understand, you know, what these things do, but you know, anyone can do it if they want to. And it's, you know, it's not in the hands of some elite, you know, or some, you know, you don't need a laboratory the size of, you know, Melbourne to, you know, to work these things out. You know, these, you know, the old companies like Boss and things like that obviously have big facilities and they lots of people working on them, all sorts of stuff. And, you know, but, you know, these days you can get, you know, really, you know, quality things built by people like you and me out of their front rooms, you know, and make a business out of it, you know. And I think that's great myself, you know, because it means that, you know, people younger than you and I have massive, you know, our kids can have massive options about what they can do, what they, you know, what they'd like to do, you know,
Well,
in a creative world. Yeah, you know,
made their own CNC machines. You know, you can go to Italy and Germany, you know, or even China, you know, buy CNC machines. But I know a couple of guys who have built them from scratch, man. You know, here in
yeah,
Hamilton, New Zealand,
yeah, see,
you know, working in factories that are producing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of orders daily.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, you're right, Simon and Arvin. It is fascinating that we do, you know, as a group of people, as humans, the ability to do all these wonderful things. It's just, yeah, tragic
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, completely, you know, and
But we,
you know.
we we won't get political or philosophical too much.
Philosophical is fine. Politics, yeah,
Yeah,
you're right. Yeah. We have lots of politics in this country.
yeah, and we have loads in this country too.
Well, everywhere,
Unfortunately,
but yeah,
unfortunately,
let's keep away from that.
yeah. No, that's fascinating,
Well,
Simon. That's interesting. I'm glad that you gave us some background into that, and I've got to go.
yeah, you go and feed yourself or your family or both. Take the dog for a
So,
walk.
just to make it quite clear then for everyone that's in the chat, so we'll be on an
Excellent.
hour later than no,
Yeah.
no, no, no,
Now,
no, no, no. Hold on. For people here in New Zealand, that we'll be an hour earlier because of daylight saving. But for the next 4 weeks, we'll be on the same time until the time changes for you, Simon.
yeah, is that all right? Is it? Yes, because I didn't realise it had changed yet, and ours doesn't change till the end of October. So yes, if we're all right, if we could still make it 6 o'clock my time, that would be cool. 6:30 my time, that's fine.
Oh yeah. No, that's fine with me. It's just like I say, I just need a week to get my head around the fact that I've got to do everything an hour earlier.
I had 3 minutes. It's a different time here. What? We'll be long in 3 minutes. Okay, fine. That's funny.
We were supposed
Really
to
cool.
have Carl. Carl was supposed to jump on.
Join he hasn't even jumped in the chat, has he? Where is he?
No, he hasn't. He hasn't jumped in the chat. So next week's show could either be a continuation of the Beatles and or the Beatles. I'll be interested to hear what Simon has to say about anything else that Simon has listened to on the album.
And the Oz yeah.
And I think Simon is going to probably, you were going to paint a picture for us of the
the 60s. Let's the background. No, we haven't done that yet. This show should be called Sidetracked. That's what it should be called. Look up here. Looks good. No, it's got there. Yes.
So I think what we'll do next week when we're straight on is you can set the scene for us, because I think that's important for the continuation of the series of the artistic time, that was happening in the 60s. What popular music was and is back then. If you could lead that discussion, and we'll find out what Carl's going to do. And
okay, yeah. But just before we go, I noticed that looking back in the chat and saying goodbye to people, that DR Guitar said he sent you a couple of pics through Facebook Messenger.
Okay, so he's just.
I don't know if they pertain to what we've what we've been talking about, or.
Hold on. Yes, so I'll just present myself. So what Dave has done, and I'll just send him a message. So Dave has just sent me a couple of photos of some records that he has of the Beatles.
Oh yeah, lovely. Look at that.
So this is the VJ records introducing
the American ones, yeah,
the American ones. So
cool, yeah.
So that was when the Beatles were just about hitting it in America, I think, Simon. They were Beatlemania had already been well and truly entrenched in the UK.
Yeah.
But this was the start of Beatlemania in
America. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Dave, for those. That's really cool. It's really nice to see albums and stuff, and the difference between the two things. If we could I'll say goodnight to the people in the chat. R2, R3. Thanks, man. Wednesday still, Dave. Thanks for dropping by. Kubrick Lover. Thank you very much for all your contributions. Really good tonight. DR Guitars, Dave. Thank you, Dave, for dropping in. That's really cool. And Arvin, of course. Mighty Arvin Gould. Regular. Thanks for dropping by. Bye. So thanks all for coming into the chat and joining in. That's really cool.
And if you join us next week, Simon's going to set the scene for a
whole week in advance. We might have an agenda for next week, but we could go somewhere else.
Well, we were just having a discussion off air last week about how understanding the Beatles as a popular music act
context.
was important for people back in the late 60s, obviously. And I think we touched a little bit on it today, Simon, because if you look at some of the reviews, like in the New York Times or something like that, which trashed the album. So what was the popular music scene that, what were they looking for? What, yeah, I look forward to that. I look forward to the setting the scene, and then we can continue, because we're going to work backwards, aren't we, on a couple of eras of the Beatles, maybe talk about the White Album and Sgt. Pepper's.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that cool?
Yeah. So I'm just typing in the chat. There we are. Cool. Yeah. So we'll see you next week, team.
Cheers, Arvin. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.